All right, guys, this is Aptera's first third quarter financial results statement since they became a public company. So they have this investor relations website, and on November 17th, they put this out. Aptera Motors reports third quarter 2025 financial results. If you look at this, this is a little bit smaller print, so I'm going to go through to the SEC website. It's the exact same thing that they put on the SEC website, so I'm going to um, grab it from here. Let's see, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so it shows up. Okay, there we go. All right. So, what they talk about is they report the Q3 2025 GAAP net loss and non-GAAP net loss. So I have to look up what GAAP stands for, and that means generally accepted accounting practices. So this is standardized across all companies when they report quarterly financials to the SECs. They must report a generally accepted accounting practices numbers. However, many companies also give non-generally accepted accounting practices numbers because they feel like certain numbers that are included don't accurately represent their income or liabilities or losses, and they will take out certain things that they feel like don't reflect it, like certain single purchases or other things that they feel like don't represent their company very well. Now, in the non-GAAP numbers, companies can do whatever they want, so they don't they could be theoretically misleading, or they could be giving you a more accurate picture of what's going on. Aptera is giving both numbers, and they always have to report both numbers, and they have to tell you how the two numbers differ, which is important. All right, so what they show, and I think this is going to be the important thing, is if you look at their net loss in over 3 months, they lost $5.5 million, which is significantly less than the $8.2 million that they lost in the similar time period last year. So their net loss is smaller. Now, if they do their adjusted net loss, which is non-GAAP, it's $3 million versus $6 million. So still better. And so if you look at this, their operating expenses are this much, and their cash and cash equivalents are $12 million. So they had $18 million in the same time period last year, and now they're ending with $12 million. So they are net losing money, but that's to be expected. And it's actually much better than we would have expected, because it looked like they were in worse financial straits when we looked at their SEC filing last. All right, so what is the difference between the GAAP numbers and non-GAAP numbers? So if you look at this, what they're basically doing is they're taking out their stock-based compensation. So a lot of their compensation to their employees is in the form of stock options, and if you take those away, their actual cash burn is less. So that's the difference between their GAAP numbers and their non-GAAP numbers, which makes sense. I think it's very important, and they feel like it's important to see how much actual cash they're burning. Obviously, stock-based compensation is not a loss of actual cash, and a lot of startups die because they run out of actual cash. So that's the difference. Now, a couple of days before, Aptera released their full Form 10Q, and this has even bigger numbers and a little more detail. So I wanted to kind of go over that. So same thing here. In this statement, they are comparing September to December. Instead of September to September, they're comparing September to the end of last year. And if you look at that, their cash equivalents looks even better. So they had burned a lot of cash, obviously, between September and December of last year. So they were burning through quite a bit of cash at that time. But it went down to $13 million, and now they have $12 million. So over the last 9 months, essentially, they've raised enough money to stay basically neutral in terms of amount of cash on hand, which is, I think, a good sign. Of course, I guess I have to reiterate, I'm not a financial analyst. I just Google stuff and I tell you what I think it means. It may be totally wrong, and if this is wrong, you should let me know in the comments below, and so that other people can also be edified by your comments. If you know more about this than I do. All right. So looking down here, you look at their operating expenses. They are relatively the same as last year. So last year, the 3 months ending in December, their operating expenses were about $8 million, and now it's about $8 million. So it's a difference of like $400,000. And then this does not take into share their stock-based compensation, which is significant. So their cash burn is probably so there. You would think their cash burn is close to about $2.5 million a month, but if you take away their cash based compensation, you can see that it's probably their burn rate is only about $1 million a month, which is not bad actually. All right. Then as you scroll down, the other thing that I found sort of interesting is they talk about the lawsuit and the SEC filing and some of the details of their agreement with Cherry Automotive. So let's go down to that. All right, so here we go. The company has a technology license agreement with Cherry Automotive. Under the amended technology license agreement, the cash consideration component has been fully satisfied. So that's good. They don't have to pay any more cash to Cherry. Now, there is an obligation for the company to issue up to $5 million in Class B shares to Cherry. They don't have to do that, and that gets triggered when the company enters into specific part supply agreements and receives initial batches of parts. So they're getting some parts from Cherry, and when those happen, they are going to pay Cherry Automotive in shares, not in cash, which is also helpful. Then litigation. This basically, there's no new information here. It just tells you about this Aptera filing. The most recent update on October 10th, Aptera Motors and individual defendants filed their answers and affirmative defenses to the amended complaint. They intend to vigorously defend this litigation. They believe it has no merit. However, litigation is uncertain. So we know that this is ongoing. And after talking to Heather Meeker, who we talked to twice about this case, this is likely to drag on for years. And so it's just kind of like the cost of doing business, basically. Then we don't find out anything new about this SEC investigation. They received a subpoena for documents, and they've given them to the SEC, and that's the latest that we know about that. Then they have these leases, which looks like their lease costs are going down, as far as I can tell. And then there is an interesting thing to note that several people have converted shares. Okay, so if you guys remember, there's people that hold Class A shares and Class B shares. Most of us hold Class B shares. They are non-voting shares. And then Class A shares are mostly held predominantly by Michael Johnson, Chris Anthony, and Steve Fambro, and a little bit by Patrick Quilter Trust. Those are the only voting shares, but they can be converted to Class B shares at any time. And so during September 2025, almost 400,000 shares of Class A shares were converted to Class B shares. Now, Class B shares are the only shares that can be sold on NASDAQ at this time. So conversion of Class A shares to Class B shares makes me think that they are planning on selling those shares, because then why else would you give up voting shares and convert them to Class B shares unless you plan on selling those shares? Now, what I wanted to know is, were those shares sold by any of the founders? Now, we know that that isn't the case, because if the founders or large shareholders convert shares, insiders, they must within 4 days file a form, and it shows up on the SEC. And as of yet, that form has not shown up. So these are non-major shareholders. I don't know who these are. These must be like early WeFunder people. or something. A little bit earlier, man. I'm trying to find where it was, but there was another 700,000 shares that were converted in October 25, and in that part, if I can find it, I'll tell you. It was specifically noted that um, it was not the. Oh yeah, here we go. Right here, I found it. In October 2025, certain holders of companies Class A common stock voluntarily converted an aggregate of 733,009 shares of Class A to equal number of Class B shares pursuant to the terms of the certificate of incorporation. Okay, none of these conversions involved holders representing greater than 5% of the company's outstanding shares or otherwise resulted in change of control. That means that this was not Michael Johnson Trust, Patrick Quilter Trust, or Steve Fambro or Chris Anthony. So far, it looks like we got almost 1 million Class A shares were converted to Class B shares. I assume this is people gearing up to trade the stock, but I can't be sure about that. But I don't know of any other reason why someone who owns Class A stock would convert to Class B other than wanting to gain some liquidity because they would give up their voting rights. And so Class A shares are, probably the more valuable shares between the two. So I see no reason to convert unless you're planning on selling them. Okay, so overall, I think the picture is pretty good. Their cash burn rate is about $1 million per month. So they're sitting pretty well in terms of cash on hand. Their burn rate is good and seems pretty sustainable, and they don't have any large cash outlays to Cherry. They've satisfied all their cash obligations, and any purchase from Cherry will come forward in the form of stocks. And there's no new information about the lawsuit or the SEC investigation. So that's where it seems like we're at. So overall, I took this as a positive. But let me know what you guys think about the filing. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.